Good evening, friends. Welcome to this series for affirmations for self-healing. Today's topic is on renunciation. Let's begin this webinar by just having a short chant, a short meditation that all of us can take this time to bring ourselves to our center, bring our energy to the heart, open the heart to receive whatever it is that we may receive during this half an hour. This chant is called I Am Free. Nothing, I am free in myself, I am free. I owe no one, I am free in myself, I am free. I need nothing, I am free in myself, I am free. I need no one, I am free in myself, I am free. In myself, I am free, in myself, I am free. I am free, ever free. Myself, I am free. I am joyful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am blissful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I owe nothing, I am free. In myself, I am free. I owe no one, I am free. In myself, I am free. I need nothing, I am free. In myself, I am free. I need no one, I am free. In myself, I am free. Myself, I am free. In myself, I am free. I am free, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am joyful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am blissful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I owe nothing, I am free. In myself, I am free. I owe no one, I am free. In myself, I am free. I need nothing, I am free. In myself, I am free. I need no one, I am free. In myself, I am free. In myself, I am free. In myself, I am free. I am free, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am joyful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am blissful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am joyful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am blissful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am joyful, ever free. In myself, I am free. I am blissful, ever free. In myself, I am free. Let's all now close our eyes and take this next minute or two to bring our energy at the point between the eyebrows, centering ourselves, and especially letting go of any thoughts, any preoccupations of the day. Watch your breath if you need to concentrate the mind, interiorize the energy, and above all, offer it all up to the point between the eyebrows. Now, while we remain in this meditative state with our eyes closed, with our eyes uplifted, let's listen to the reading for this week on the topic of renunciation. Let's see what Swami Kriyananda says about renunciation. Renunciation means turning one's back on non-essentials, that we may give our whole attention to the Lord. We might think of renunciation as an investment, which initially may seem a loss, but in time becomes multiplied to many times its original worth. The least gift that we give to God will return to us in divine blessings 1,000-fold. Renunciation means nothing less than the gift to God of oneself. Renunciation is of the heart. It isn't what you wear or the outward rules you follow. When you renounce all for God, you hold that renunciation as a precious secret between you and Him. All your desires, all your ambitions then are for Him alone. Let's affirm now together, first in a loud voice. I spurn the tempting magic of this world, with its rainbow bubbles ever ready to burst. See where I fly, high above the tall mountains. I am free, I am free. Now in a regular voice. I spurn the tempting magic of this world, with its rainbow bubbles ever ready to burst. See where I fly, high above the tall mountains. I am free, I am free. And now whispering, and as you whisper, feel as though you're planting this affirmation deeper and deeper into yourself. I spurn the magic, the tempting magic of this world, with its rainbow bubbles ever ready to burst. See where I fly, high above the tall mountains. I am free, I am free. And I'll repeat this affirmation now with me, silently, mentally, offering this affirmation up at the point between the eyebrows, behind closed eyes. As you lift your gaze, feel as though it is from that point that you're making this affirmation. I spurn the tempting magic of this world, with its rainbow bubbles ever ready to burst. See where I fly, high above the tall mountains. I am free, I am free. I spurn the tempting magic of this world, with its rainbow bubbles ever ready to burst. See where I fly, high above the tall mountains. I am free, I am free. And silently, let's also offer this prayer. Lord, help me to see that in no outward experience will I ever find fulfillment. All that my heart has ever sought awaits me in Thee. Well, hello friends, for those of you who've just joined us, we're talking about the topic of renunciation. All of us are well aware that to accomplish anything in this world, there is a certain degree of renunciation that is involved. If a student wants to score high marks in his examinations, wants to do well, he might have to study hard late at night and have to renounce some of his sleep. If someone needs to work on a project at work, maybe they need to renounce some of the maybe family get-togethers, maybe their meals in order to continue working and stay focused. And so we all agree that in order to achieve anything, in order to really get our energy flowing in one direction, sometimes we have to put out of our mind other distractions that in normal daily life are just things that we do. And so it is for the spiritual life as well. But I'd go a step further and say in the spiritual life, renunciation and a spiritual life are almost two sides of the same coin. And it is for that reason several people either reject a spiritual life saying, oh, I cannot renounce my worldly responsibilities. Others might think that they are not yet spiritual because they are unable to renounce and say, only after I have finished these responsibilities, after I can renounce them, then I can begin my spiritual journey in earnest. And it is there that we need to bring a little bit of clarification into the concept of renunciation. We have been raised in a traditional sense, our history that spans perhaps the last 2000, 2500 years, from where we draw most of our knowledge of the world, our knowledge of past traditions. There we have been given an image of renunciation that's very outward, that has an outward action involved, and it's essentially world negating. It's about spurning the world and spurning any self-interest that we might have in this world. And in that way we express it primarily as an outward act of, I can't do this, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't go here, I shouldn't look here, I need to give this up, I can't eat this. And all these rules, as Swamiji talks about, all these outward observances come into play. And we somehow imagine that that is what renunciation is about. And we can't kid ourselves, certainly that aspect of renunciation is important, and even in today's day and age, though we've come into, as Sri Yukteswar said, a higher age, mankind's consciousness itself is being more uplifted. But even today, that particular approach to renunciation is absolutely valid. The only problem is, the more we emphasize that direction, the more we move away from the true essence of what that renunciation was about. All renunciation, any renunciation, if it's true, leads towards renunciation of the ego, leads towards transcendence of an ego, perhaps that's a better word. And the folly that we might fall into in constantly expressing our renunciation outwardly is one that we might believe, and I think many people do believe, that by outward observances, by outward actions, somehow we will be given an inward experience. And in some cases that might be true, but in most cases it's not. We have this beautiful story in the autobiography of Bhaduri Mahashaya, the levitating saint, where his disciples and several others are kind of saying to Bhaduri Mahashaya, oh, you are such a true renunciate, because Bhaduri Mahashaya came from a very wealthy family. And so they said, you've given up all this wealth, all this land, all these responsibilities, and now you're seeking God. Wow, what a true renunciate you are. But Bhaduri Mahashaya's response to them was, I am no renunciate. I have just renounced a few paltry pennies of this earth in order to receive the infinite treasure, the infinite wealth of God. It is you who are the true renunciates, for you renounce that infinite treasure in God for these little attachments, for this little bit of wealth, for this little bit of well-being on this earth. Now, seeing that, we might say, oh my goodness, I need to renounce my wealth. I need to, in order to truly be able to receive God's wealth. But you see, Bhaduri Mahashaya's move in that direction came not just by, oh, I need to give this up in order to search for God in earnest. He had an experience where he felt and he realized that none of what I have right now is giving me what I need, and therefore I recognize that it's not as important for me. But it was his experience that led him to make that outward act. But for most of us who haven't had that experience yet, we have taken renunciation basically on a certain blind belief that after I can do all these things, somehow the inner experiences will follow. And it is to correct in a certain manner this slight misunderstanding, this slight misfocus of renunciation that Swami Kriyananda in the year 2009, he created a new renunciate order that he called the Naya Swami order, the new Swami order, very appropriate. And in this, he tried to shift the focus of renunciation from a more negative emphasis to a positive emphasis, where he said, rather than looking at renunciation as self-negating, as world-negating, why don't we instead look at renunciation as freedom or samadhi affirming? Because he said, in keeping the goal of samadhi, of freedom, of union with God in mind, naturally as we begin to move in that direction, things that do not add, do not help us in that direction will tend to fall off, will tend to naturally leave us, or we will naturally put them aside without having to feel like Baduri Mashaya. He didn't feel any suffering in that. He didn't feel, oh my goodness, I'm having to give all this wealth away, what a great sacrifice I'm making. No. He knew where he was heading. He knew the joy he was going to experience. He knew the freedom he was going to experience. And it is the same for us. If we know, if our experience of that freedom, of that joy, is what drives us forward, naturally those things that do not add to that joy, do not add to that freedom, will tend to fall on the wayside. It's like getting into an auto rickshaw and saying, I want to go to such and such place. We do not need to tell the auto driver, but don't go here, and make sure you do not also take that other turn, and make sure we do not go to this other place. Once you've mentioned to him where it is that you want to go, he's naturally going to take you there, and he's not going to want to say, oh, let's not go through this place, let's not go through that place. And perhaps on the way to getting to that place, you get stuck in traffic. Perhaps you have to take a little bit of a detour, which is slightly longer. But those things become less material, less important in the process, because you know where you're heading, and in that process of wanting to go there, none of those things matter. You're not looking out and saying, oh look, I'm not passing, I'm not going there anymore, wow, I'm only heading in that direction. That doesn't matter anymore to us, because we're so focused on where we're going, and that becomes the draw, that becomes the entire emphasis and focus of our renunciate life, and naturally things tend to fall aside. You see, when the idea of renunciation came about, and it's as old as the idea of moving towards God itself, it's because all self-realized masters, anyone who's ever reached the goal, recognizes that this world is not our true home. And we recognize it too in our hearts deeply when we get to that stage where we say, this world really, I don't belong here. But in recognizing that this is not our true home, sometimes we don't treat the world rightly, because there are many ways to recognize this is not our true home. For example, rather than saying this is not my home, therefore I have no responsibility towards it, let's look at ourselves instead as a guest. What happens when you go to someone's house as a guest? You do not say, this is not mine, so I won't take care of it, or then I won't, because this is not my room, I don't need to worry about the cleanliness about it. No. As a guest, in fact, we become more sensitive to the place. We're more caring for the place because we know it's not ours, it belongs to someone else. So there's much more respect there and much more detachment. And so look at ourselves also as a guest. There's this beautiful story of a rabbi, of a Jewish priest in Israel who was well known for his deep spiritual realization. And so there was a man who was traveling from America. He was visiting Israel, and he thought, well, I've heard of this rabbi. Let me go meet him. Let me go interview him, have a talk with him, and see what he's like, and see what the secret of his spiritual evolution and realization is. And when he finds the house, he goes into the house and he's quite shocked. He sees there's almost nothing in this house, just a wooden plank that he uses for his bed, nothing else, no real books, no nothing. And he's a little surprised, but he comes to the rabbi and says, wow, you must truly be spiritual because you are able to live like this. And again the rabbi says, no, I'm not spiritual. This has nothing to do with spirituality. Look at you. Have you brought with you to Israel your bed, your sofa, your bathtub, your bookshelves? And the man says, no, of course not. And the rabbi asks him, then why haven't you brought all those things that belong to you, that are yours? He says, well, because I'm only visiting. I'm just a tourist here. This isn't my home. Everything is in my home. And the rabbi says, well, I too am a tourist here. I too am just visiting this world. This isn't my true home. So why will I spend time unnecessarily accumulating things that aren't in tune with the idea that this isn't my true home? And that's the kind of emphasis that we should be giving our life and giving our renunciation. The essential idea of renunciation, and especially in its outward manifestation, is to cut down, to reduce your life down to absolute essentials. And Swami speaks about it, to remove all non-essential things from our life. And if you can put that, your spiritual life, into that perspective, you realize that there's not that much we need. But you'll also realize that it's individual. It depends on everybody. If someone has a family, has children, naturally they have more responsibilities than someone who is single. And if both of them are on the spiritual path, they won't be able to express that the same way. That person who has 2 children and has a husband or a wife needs to ensure that they have at least a large enough home, that the children are going to a decent enough school, therefore that they're earning enough money. So would renunciation mean that they should completely move into a tiny little house somewhere in a corner in a neighborhood that's very dirty and not wealthy? No. Whereas that single person, maybe for him it is. Maybe he does need to move from a large mansion where he's all alone, where he's not really using it, where there's so many things to distract him, to divert him. Maybe he does need to move into something that's smaller, that's something more appropriate to his search and to his situation. And so we need to individually look at our lives and see, what is renunciation for me? How can I move a bit closer? By my own experience, first I need to move towards an experience of joy. Once I've had that joy, once I recognize that it wasn't these outward things that's giving me this joy, then we move to the second phase of saying, okay, what can I remove from my life that's distracting to me in my efforts towards greater and greater joy, in my efforts towards bliss, towards freedom. And in that process, there'll be no heartbreak. There'll be like, oh, look at me, I'm having to give this up, I'm having to give that up. Sometimes in that kind of renunciation, rather than renouncing the ego, we tend to affirm the ego. I am able to just be detached. I don't have the desire towards this. I can easily give this up. All you're really hearing is I. And isn't that really the thing that's holding us back all the time? You know, in the classical definition of Patanjali on yoga, he says yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, and most of us know that by now. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices, of the vrittis, of those whirlpools of chitta, of feeling, of likes and dislikes, of desire, of attachment, whatever it be. And Swami in this book, and I'd like especially to mention this book to all of you, because it's such a fabulous book. This is the book, A Renunciate Order in the New Age. Swami really brings such clarity to renunciation as we can express it in our present situation now, according to the world situation at large and according to our own individual situation. Great practical tools and tips about how we can express this renunciation in our life. And in this book, Swami mentions that it's the ego that is essentially the I, or the center of each of these vrittis. I want this. I like this. I need this. I don't want this. I dislike this. So if we get to the center of all those vrittis, we'll recognize that all there really is that I principle. And renunciation is very helpful in the sense that It's the process where we're not adding more energy to these vrittis, we're starving these vrittis of energy. And in some cases, renunciation is also withdrawing energy from the vritti, making it not so magnetic so that it doesn't constantly suck our energy in one direction or the other. But it becomes less and less powerful. But eventually that I continues to remain. That we cannot take away. That we cannot just destroy through renunciation. And that's where the samadhi affirming, that positive approach to renunciation becomes very important. In the Mahabharata, Bhishma, who Yogananda said represents the ego, he's given this boon, he's given this power that he cannot die or no one can kill him unless and until he himself is willing and ready to offer himself up unto death. And that's the same with our ego. The ego cannot be destroyed. The ego cannot be killed. The ego, by its own accord, needs to get into that mode, into that bhav, where it naturally is ready to offer itself up, where it offers the energy that's committed here at the medulla oblongata, all the way up to the Agya Chakra, all the way up to the spiritual eye. And in doing so, will come true spiritual enlightenment. But yes, the renunciation is going to help us in helping us remove those vrittis. Of course, meditation is the best way in order to deal with those vrittis. But we can't be meditating all the time unless we can. We have to also try to get our life outwardly in attunement with that upward flow of energy, in attunement with the idea that we're trying to neutralize these vrittis, and therefore renunciations is key. It's key because you don't want to feed more and more of those vrittis. You don't want to have to go through those same experiences and the same vritti that you're trying to neutralize in meditation. When you come out of meditation, you start strengthening it again. So therefore, there has to be that concept of renunciation. But always remember and always approach renunciation as an act of self-offering. Because in the end, that's what it boils down to. Offering ourselves every act, everything that you possess, everything that you need to do, all your responsibilities in this life. If you can offer them up and say, I offer this to you in my search for joy, in my search for freedom. When the time comes and the thing is no longer serving the purpose, no longer adding to your search, naturally it will fall away. Yes, a little discipline is needed. Yes, a little willpower is needed. Certainly, we can't just wait and when these things will fall away, when these desires will disappear, then naturally I will become a renunciate. No. We always have to move forward. We always have to push a little bit against our comfort zone, but not to the point where we depend solely on that outward expression. Always depend on that feeling of joy, on that sense of freedom that comes from that outward act, never on the act itself. And I'd like to close finally with that beautiful story of King Janaka and Sukadev, where Janaka asks Sukadev to travel around his kingdom or around the palace holding that little cup full of oil and telling him not to spill any oil, but at the same time to have a full, complete experience of the palace. So let's remember that. Keep that focus on the oil of God, on the oil of freedom, on the oil of joy, but don't do it at the expense of having the complete experience of this world. And when you have that experience and when you have that focus, naturally your life will be one of a true renunciate. Many blessings to you.